the Illuminati were to obtain control of the press and all other agencies which distribute information to the public. News and information was to be slanted so the Goyams would come to believe that a one-world government is the only solution to our many and varied problems. Their plot, their plan, their conspiracy remains invisible.
The whole agenda is to create a one-world government where everybody has an RFID chip implanted in them. All money is to be in those chips, right? There'll be no more cash. And this is giving me straight from Rockefeller himself. This is what they want to accomplish.
We need some outside universal threat. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war?
What the fuck is that? The fuck is this shit? The fuck is that?
10 de septiembre de 2020, Pentágono, desde el Departamento de Defensa de los Estados Unidos, ubicado en el condado de Arlington, Virginia, cerca de Washington, D.C. Un rayo de luz brilló sobre el horizonte. El tributo recuerda las vidas perdidas en el Pentágono el 11 de septiembre. Pero, ¿qué podemos ver sobre estas luces cerca de las nubes? Una cantidad de orbes se pueden ver cómo están subiendo por la luz emitida. La cantidad se puede ver a simple vista sobre 11 objetos brillantes que se pierden entre las nubes. ¿Qué pasó en el Pentágono? ¿Estamos ante los visitantes que colaboran con el gobierno de los Estados Unidos? ¿O son las esferas conocidas y ofrecidas en este canal, llamadas también entes biológicas? A finales de abril de 2020, el ministro de Defensa de Japón, Taro Kono, pidió o exigió que el gobierno de los Estados Unidos le brindara más datos sobre los vídeos de ovni Nimitz Tic-Tac, a pesar de que Kono dijo que ningún piloto militar japonés había admitido haber visto un ovni. En ese momento parecía que el gobierno de los Estados Unidos no estaba muy interesado en compartir nada más que los vídeos que ya eran públicos, pero algo cambió desde entonces. Bienvenidos a Snack 2. Este mes de septiembre parece estar llevándose la palma de avistamientos. Una sucesión de objetos y esferas brillantes son divisadas en todas partes del mundo. Y como no, en esta ocasión vamos mucho más lejos. Pentágono, sede del Departamento de Defensa de los Estados Unidos. 10 de septiembre de 2020. Una luz potente que ilumina gran parte de la sede y las nubes superiores marca el 19º aniversario de este fatídico día, el 11 de septiembre de 2001. La Fundación Tunnel Two Tower celebró una ceremonia en el Pentágono la noche del 10 de septiembre. La ceremonia se cerró al público debido a la pandemia del coronavirus, pero durante la ceremonia la organización iluminó su monumento conmemorativo, Torres de Luz, para que los residentes de DC y el mundo lo vieran. Sin pensarlo dos veces, STR1 Care, llamado así en Twitter, decidió plasmar en su grabación lo que estaba ocurriendo en el Pentágono, cuando una cantidad de orbes u objetos esféricos a simple vista y brillantes son dirigidos hacia arriba y en dirección de la luz. La cantidad no es pequeña y de ello hablamos en diferentes vídeos, ya que últimamente se están avistando estos objetos en masa, claramente dejándose ver ante los ciudadanos de la Tierra. Más de 11 objetos brillantes vuelan hacia arriba en todas las direcciones y siempre guiados por la luz potente que desprende el Departamento de Defensa de los Estados Unidos, el Pentágono. ¿Estamos ante visitantes desconocidos sobre Arlington? ¿O una vez más se hacen ver las entes biológicas sobre nuestras cabezas? ¿Qué pasó en el Pentágono? Convencidos de que el espacio está plagado de tales formas de vida, criaturas que existen en el espacio y han sido grabadas en cámaras en vivo, es un hecho, ya que estas imágenes podemos apreciarlas desde la Estación Espacial Internacional. Pero verlas en nuestros cielos ya se hace más presente y muchos expertos en estas entidades biológicas confirman que siempre estuvieron entre nosotros. Estas criaturas vivientes, llamadas también EVAs, entidades biológicas atmosféricas, se mueven tanto a gran altura como a muy baja altura, ya que son filmadas en cualquier altitud. Pero sobre nuestras cabezas existe todo un mundo diverso y de proporciones gigantescas. Hace poco nos hicimos eco de un gran vídeo, el 17 de agosto a gran altura, y con el equipo con el que trabaja David Gutiérrez, logra captar una cantidad de orbes translúcidos y luminiscentes sobre Alicante. Se puede observar cómo tenemos en primera instancia orbes de una tonalidad blanca surcando los cielos, moviéndose en todas las direcciones, al igual que otras las encontramos estáticas. Quizás estás observando un satélite, pero en realidad no es un satélite. El Dr. Franklin Roell, un ufólogo estadounidense con doctorado en física nuclear teórica, ha sugerido que las entidades biológicas llamadas Thoriet viven en el espacio exterior y son capaces de sobrevivir en condiciones de temperatura cero y presión atmosférica cero. Sin embargo, esto sucede en nuestro planeta. Esto sucede sobre nuestras cabezas, en las nubes. Pero el 8 de septiembre de 2020, durante una sesión de preguntas y respuestas en una conferencia de prensa, el ministro japonés Kono dijo lo siguiente. El periodista, con respecto a los ovnis, le hizo varias preguntas. Le dijo que qué pasaba con el estado del examen. Además, qué es lo que pensaba también sobre las cooperaciones entre Japón y Estados Unidos cuando encuentren un objeto volador no identificado. El ministro Kono respondió que pronto abordarían la política. Se habló de Japón y Estados Unidos durante la reunión con el secretario Esper en Guam. Sin embargo, el ministro Kono dijo que debía abstenerse de dar más detalles, pero le gustaría seguir cooperando firmemente en el futuro con los Estados Unidos. El periodista le preguntó de nuevo, ¿eso significa que han estado trabajando juntos en los avistamientos ovnis y en el futuro seguirán haciéndolo? Sin embargo, el ministro Kono respondió que le gustaría abstenerse de dar más detalles, es decir, se cortó la comunicación. El 29 de agosto, el secretario de Defensa Mark Esper recibió al ministro de Defensa japonés Taro Kono en Guam, donde reafirmaron la fuerza de la alianza entre Estados Unidos y Japón y discutieron formas de profundizar y expandir la cooperación de defensa bilateral sobre el espacio. El secretario Esper y el ministro Kono intercambiaron puntos de vista sobre su visión compartida de una región Indo-Pacífico libre y abierta. El secretario expresó su seria preocupación por la decisión de Beijing de imponer una ley de seguridad nacional en Hong Kong. Ambos ministros reafirmaron su compromiso de mantener un orden basado en reglas en los mares de China Oriental y Meridional, y más ampliamente en la región del mundo. Pero sin embargo, también coincidieron en la importancia de las redes seguras y del fortalecimiento de la seguridad y la información para proteger las tecnologías de defensa avanzadas.
All right, Zechariah chapter 5, verse 1. I turned and lifted up mine eyes and looked and behold a flying roll. You say, what's that? I have any idea. It's a flying roll, whatever it is. And he said, what seest thou? And I answered, I see a flying roll, the length thereof is 20 cubits, the breadth thereof is 10 cubits. This is the curse that goeth forth over the face of the whole earth, for every one that stealeth shall be cut off as on this side, according to it, one side of the roll. Everyone that sweareth shall be cut off as that on the other side, according to it, and it will bring forth, and it shall enter the house of the thief, and the house of him that sweareth falsely by my name, and it shall remain in the midst of his house, and shall consume it with the timbers thereof and the stones thereof. That's a flying roll. It's unidentified.
Franklin, we see a long line, a couple of star-like things, and a lot of things swimming in the foreground. Can you describe what you're seeing?
Well, the long line is a tether, and there's a little bit of debris that kind of flies with us, and it's illuminated by the sun at such low angle. So there's a lot of stray light, and it's getting washed out quickly, but Claude is trying to do a quick, good job here adjusting the cameras.
It wasn't until a few years ago that I really started to get into researching all this information, looking at, going through thousands of pages of information about UFOs that just confirmed, what I had already believed about this phenomenon, that I believe the evidence clearly points that they are, in fact, demons.
And, there are others, Brother Michael, who are now beginning to believe that as well. So you're not out there all by yourself anymore. So these demons would make them then spiritual phenomenon. I would take it, right?
Yeah, I think when you look at it, there's certain characteristics that everyone will agree has been seen and demonstrated also by these UFOs, such as they penetrate the ground, they penetrate water, they disappear in front of people, they appear right in front of people. One person will see a UFO and the person next to them will not see the UFO. They change colors, sometimes only one accelerating. They change shape, they change size. Many people have made the comment that they seem like they're alive almost. And so these are all characteristics of something that's not a physical or material being or construction. It's got to be something that's a spiritual phenomenon with those kinds of characteristics.
You need to understand, disinformation is deliberate deceit to hide other things. And so there's so much of that. And some of it is surprisingly well-sponsored disinformation.
I'm going to sum up this talk and mention an overview of the alien agenda. The alien agenda is really decimate the planet to take the remaining human subjects as slaves, and the aliens would use this planet for their own means.
My question I'd like to ask is this: if the aliens have a 1,200 IQ, can speak all these languages, and are so powerful, what prevents them from just taking over?
Well, it's a good question. We are an alien species to them, and our germs have a tendency to kill them. They're also a dying race, and they're in far worse condition than anybody with the worst case of terminal cancer. They are in need of us to some degree.
Does that explain some of the visual glances of these things? They seem to just simply disappear. They're gone.
Exactly. They're appearing out of nowhere and then disappearing right in front of people, and that's why scientists who have no axes to grind, they just say that it doesn't make that much sense. And also, if they're just trying to observe us, to take account of what we're doing on Earth, after a while, after so many months or years or centuries, it kind of gets old. They either would take us over, or they've already discovered all the information they need to know about Earthlings, and so they're just going to take us over or make first contact and just sort of do what they need to do next. To endlessly observe us, it doesn't make any sense. It's something where, and also see if we have all these sightings, as you know much better than I do. Where are they landing? We don't see them getting out to get anything to drink or to eat. We don't see them. They've never tried to make contact with any large amount of people in a major city, and so this doesn't. And also all the endless medical procedures that the people who have claimed to have been abducted. Why the endless medical procedures? I mean, if we're talking about such an advanced race of alien beings, they don't need to do that over and over and over again.
Interesting perspective. Let's talk about some of the facts out there of evidence that may support your conclusion that the UFOs are spiritual phenomena, not physical, like so many other people also believe. What can we pinpoint again?
Well, again, it's something where you cannot have a material or a physical being penetrating the ground, penetrating the water, appearing in front of people, then disappearing instantly, and then also changing colors, sometimes only when they're accelerating, with every color in the spectrum has been recorded. Many UFOs coming and making one UFO breaking apart and then going into multiple UFOs. It doesn't make sense. And then not only just that, but to get into the fact of how far they're traveling and the speeds that they would have to travel, and just the other problems with cosmic dust and traveling at the speed of light, and then running into those bits of cosmic dust, the explosions that would be created, the amount of energy that would be consumed in traveling from these distances. Just all those kinds of things really scream out that you're dealing with a spiritual phenomenon, not a material or physical phenomenon.
There does seem to be a deception here, because I've always wondered, my gosh, if they're that benevolent, if they're that understanding of humankind, make yourself available.
That's why some of these other scientists have said that they seem to be trying to set people up to deceive them as if they are aliens, but the facts just say that they can't be that there's something else. It doesn't make any sense, and there's something else, a psychological deception that's going on here. And many of these scientists say, I don't know what it is, but we've concluded that it's got to be that. It's got to be something bigger is going on here than just them trying to show people that, yes, here's a UFO that you're seeing now, we are aliens, that there's got to be something else going on here, on top of the fact that the characteristics of them show that they just cannot be some material or physical craft.
Do you think humans are involved in the deception? I'm losing my voice here. I gotta pop it back.
As far as I think there have been deliberate hoaxes that have been perpetrated, and it's an interesting statement. I mean, there are many that could be quoted, but Gordon Creighton, who I know you know of him, probably, who died in 2003, he made this statement in the British journal Flying Saucer Review. He said, quote, "There seems to be no evidence yet that any of these craft or beings originate from outer space."
They appear to have the ability to materialize and dematerialize without a trace. One of the great mysteries of the UFOs isn't seeing them, is trying to figure out where are they when you don't see them. Some people say, well, they're from another galaxy. Most physicists will debunk that for lots of reasons. They seem to pose that way, but for lots of, if they came, if there are that many coming from another galaxy, you think you'd sense the traffic. We'll come to that with some more reasonable explanations, and you're going to discover the two top researchers in the last century, really, is Jacques Vallée, France, and J. Allen Hynek, the American. Now, J. Allen Hynek was head of astronomy at Cornell, and he set out to debunk this nonsense about UFOs, and he became one of the most ardent, competent, balanced researchers in the trade. J. Allen Hynek, he died a few years ago. Both of these respected researchers came to the conclusion that they're not intergalactic for lots of physics. There are a lot of physics rebuttals to that conjecture. They both argued that these things are demonic. Their term. They've written many, many books. You can check them out. These are not religious people. They're not people with any kind of personal agenda. But they came to the conclusion that these things, on the one hand, And by the way, we take for granted that we strip away the nonsense and the hoaxes, set that aside. There's tens of thousands of files you have to wallow through. When you cut through all that, there's still a core group, a substantial core group of real events that need explanation. And so on the one hand, they exhibit physical properties on the one hand. On the other hand, they also violate all physical laws. And so the conclusion that both J. Allen Hynek and Jacques Vallée and others have come to is that they're hyperdimensional, that somehow they come from another dimension periodically. Somewhere between 1 and 3%, various polls agree, somewhere between 1 and 3% of Americans claim that they have had an abduction experience. That's over 5 million people, or in that neighborhood. Not a few thousand deranged people, not a few, disaffected. This is, we'll talk a little more about this. This is a very, very disturbing phenomenon in the counseling profession. Now, part of the problem of the UFOs is they have some paradoxical behavior. On the one hand, they're seen by multiple competent witnesses. They are plotted on radar, sometimes multiple radars simultaneously. They leave tangible traces on the ground, sometimes radiation, evidence of burning and other things. So they are apparently real in the sense of being physical, on the one hand. There are photographs. Sometimes they show up on photographs, sometimes they don't. But here's the problem. While they seem to be tangible on the one hand, they exhibit behavior that can't possibly be physical. They can go in excess of 6,000 miles per hour without sonic booms. So what on earth does that mean? I'd like to know how they do that trick. They've been plotted making right-angle turns at over 16,000 miles an hour. That defies the laws of physics. That's now perhaps the most disturbing thing of all. They appear to have the ability to materialize and dematerialize without a trace.
So you make a list of hypotheses. This is obviously not a natural phenomenon, and the extraterrestrial explanation seemed to be the best one. Why shouldn't we know that there's got to be life throughout the universe? So why shouldn't it be able to come here, especially since there must be civilizations there that are thousands, if not millions of years ahead of us? But then as you get more and more data, you realize that's not what the witnesses are describing. What the witnesses are describing is something that in many cases comes out of nowhere, disappears into nowhere. There are cases of objects becoming transparent on the spot, physical objects, material objects. And I've no question that people have said, well, Vallée doesn't believe this is physical. Well, of course it is physical. It's material at some times, but it can also change shape. It can also merge with other objects, and it can also disappear on the spot. Well, if it does that, then it could be from anywhere, anytime. And then I started looking at some of the things that didn't fit. And one of the things that I had to ask is, when did this actually start? Every UFO book starts with, on June 24, 1947, Kenneth Arnold saw something about Ukrainians. Well, that's not really true. I mean, we have data from the 30s and the 20s and from 1896 and 1897 all over the United States, and then you can go back in history. And many people don't want to hear that. They want to hear that this is, if you follow the first level extraterrestrial theory, then ETs, discovered us when the atom bomb went off and they came here to study us. Well, that's not what the data says. So when did it start? And I found an enormous wealth of data going back to medieval times and even before. Of course, as you go back in history, you lose the cultural context, and it's harder to understand the data. But in medieval times, there were records, especially the records of the church, that were kept very, very carefully about strange phenomena. The skeptics are always saying, well, give us your best case and we'll take it apart. There is no such thing as one best case in any field. You have to look at an accumulation of cases and look for patterns, and then that's how the phenomenon reveals itself to you.
And for a long period of time, or for a period of time, I believed it was extraterrestrial. I now believe it is interdimensional, the phenomena. In other words, we're looking at so-called spirit beings from another dimension. Apparently there was some sort of a confrontation, there was some sort of a war between these beings, sides were drawn up, and we're kind of like, we're almost like cannon fodder in a way. It's unseen war, which is happening in another dimension all around us that we don't see. You know, when you see something like that, it's overwhelming. It will change your worldview. And is that the coming great deception that ancient manuscripts warn us of? Here's a prophecy from 2,000 years ago, that what is coming on the earth will be so bizarre that even the elect would be deceived if that were possible.
I believe that many of us were shown these documents over the years so that later we would talk about it. I mean, how can you keep the existence of extraterrestrials, if they were real, a secret? And how could anyone keep quiet knowing that they had seen documentation, official government documents labeled top secret, that expressed that these extraterrestrials were real and had visited this earth? I wanted to know just how true all of this was, and I began a program of research to find out if extraterrestrials were real. What I discovered was amazing. What I discovered, ladies and gentlemen, is that there has been a plan in existence to create an artificial extraterrestrial threat to this earth in order to create a one-world totalitarian socialist government. All the bombardment of the public with movies about flying saucers in the 50s, right after the United Nations Treaty was signed and the UN Participation Act was pushed through Congress, and all of the incidents since that have convinced the majority of the American people that flying saucers are real and extraterrestrials exist, and that flying saucers are from an extraterrestrial origin. This is being promulgated in many ways, by television commercials, in the movies, in the newspapers, by creating incidents either real or imagined. What better way to implement a plan to bring about a one-world government than to create the possibility in the minds of the people of the world that we are being threatened from some other species, from some other planet, and do it in a way that if anybody questions it or challenged it or wants to talk about it publicly, that they are ridiculed.
And obviously they have the secret base there where advanced aircraft is being tested. And so it's not one or the other, it's actually both. And what's interesting is this fellow Jack Parsons, who was the main person involved in the satanic ritual, he was involved in creating some of the most advanced technological stuff that we have right now in rocket propulsion systems. He was even involved with a lot of stuff that NASA does. They even named a crater on the moon. It's called the Parsons Crater. It was named after Jack Parsons.
Right.
So you see all the connections here.
I know for a fact that the plan is to make all of us feel totally helpless, that what's happening is beyond our realm to affect because we've been taken over by aliens, that our Independence Day is dawning. So beware of that. Understand that those criminals have been keeping information and technology from us under their blanket of national security. They are 25 years ahead of us at least. They're way ahead. So when they say, it's aliens, and they show us some incredible technology, don't fall into the trap of feeling totally helpless, that this is beyond our realm to affect. Superstition begins where knowledge leaves off. And they have been keeping knowledge from us for a long time. People have all kinds of belief systems. And I'm sure each and every one of you has various and different belief systems as well. But what I am saying is that it was my experience that these were people claiming to be aliens.